conscientious objectors so that they could avoid having adverse events in the military from Muslim soldiers, the kind of event he himself did. And then he also he went to his superiors and he said he wanted some of the returning soldiers to be treated for war crimes and what they had done in the war. U.S. soldiers. Now, 3 weeks before the killings, Hassan purchased a semi-automatic pistol and several high-capacity 20-round magazines, and he also had a handgun, and he used those things in the killings. He'd taken extra weapons training, and he probably was planning this for a long time because he had been doing extra training for in weapons. People used to think, well, why is he doing that? Because he's a psychiatrist. Why is he learning to be such a good marksman? And then in the weeks before the killings, he was doing a lot of practice at a range, a shooting range. Okay, when he did do the killings, people said that he seemed very focused, very calm, and he seemed to go for the people who wore uniform. If there were any there that weren't wearing a uniform, although one or more did get killed, I believe, who weren't literally in the military, just working for it, but he did try to go for the people with the uniforms. And when people were on the ground, having been shot and they fell, he went at them with great determination to finish them off. And he left where he was and he ran around and hid, and he was shooting a lot of people in the back too. Okay, now very curiously, as we know from the 9/11 hijackers, Hassan too, this very meek, shy, withdrawn, religious, wouldn't, go near women generally. He used to go for lap dances to one of the all-nude bars, and you'd pay $50. He would buy some lap dances, and the dancers said he was very shy and very reserved, but he would do that. Isn't that curious? And it's also what the 9/11 people did. Okay, and he also made a salary of about $92,000 or $93,000 a year, but he lived in a sort of rundown tenement complex with a kind of grimy apartment and like meager few little dilapidated possessions. And this is also how jihadists have lived, other ones that we know about, for example, from 9/11. And he also sent a lot of his money overseas to Islamic charities. And of course, the question becomes, are these charities that were funding jihad, or were they neutral charities? And that information I did not have it was not being disclosed what was being found out about that. And the person I referred to before, Anwar al-Awlaki, who's involved apparently in the background of this person from Nigeria as well, and like I said, is in Yemen. And in fact, the United States made a bombing attempt there a few days ago. And they didn't say it was to get him out, but I'm sure it was. It was against his compound or house. Apparently he was not killed in that bombing expedition in Yemen just a few days ago. But anyway, this imam, who is an inspirer, and he was born in the United States. Al-Awlaki is a native born. He speaks very good English. I believe he was born in New Mexico, but moved to Yemen eventually. He used to be an imam at the mosque, as I said, that Hassan attended, and also two other people who did the 9/11. Well, he has advocated to jihadists that they do lone terror acts such as Hassan did. In other words, they don't need to be with Al-Qaeda. They don't need to be with a group to do it together with people. That if they're in situations where they can get at people who are having conflicts with people who have the religion of Islam, that it's sort of a duty and an obligation and a good thing to do a lone terror act of killing and terrorism and jihad. And also he preaches to avoid a life of luxury, which certainly Hassan did, and to give one's wealth over to the cause of jihad. We don't know if that's where the wealth of Hassan did go, but that is what the Imam teaches. Now, the instigation to me thinking about this and researching it, as I said in the beginning, was because all over the news, and then from someone in the psychology business, seeing this idea, oh, poor Hassan, he must have had a terrible work overload. Oh, maybe he was mentally ill. Maybe he was mentally ill. And I say this is most irritating because you know, if this is a war, then, well, as you'll see, maybe we're all mentally ill. And why do we need to frame it in those kind of terms which do not represent reality? The most important question about Hassan's behavior is not one about vicarious war fatigue, stress, or crippling workloads. The important question for assessing his behavior is religious zealotry and fundamentalist jihad mental illness? Perhaps also, what about the personalities or character of persons who follow its pursuit? Now dig this. By extension, one might ask, are the current U.S. wars mental illness? War is war, and when you don't have tanks and drones and daisy cutter bombs, you go at it with the means you have. Now, other things about Hassan, that he wasn't just an overloaded. In fact, they said he was kind of, you know, not too enthusiastic in his work. He was a little bit, you know, hanging back and not, you know, really doing it. There were some reviews of his work when he was at Walter Reed as a psychiatrist. Probably because he was so devoted and it was, you know, really not getting to the point of where his whole mind and body and soul was going. Now, he had a business card that represented him as SOA, which means Soldier of Allah. It said he was a psychiatrist, and he said SOA, Soldier of Allah, on his business card, and he did not make any reference that he was with the United States military on his card. And then in interviewing so many people who knew him, and many did, he used to go over their house and have coffee. They talked to him, they knew him. They weren't Muslims. They liked him. He was in the neighborhood, and he was kind and compassionate. They saw him as quiet, shy, nice, and highly, highly religious. And he used to talk to people about God and the Quran and so forth. Okay, now sometimes he dressed in his uniform. The base was apparently nearby, but he lived off base. And by the way, other soldiers lived who had been in the military. So it shows you that when you leave the military, since this was kind of a rundown place, you don't exactly get a good life after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. But so he was dressing in his uniform, or he would wear street clothes, and then in some time he started to wear the Muslim robes, you know, the cap, the long garment, and so forth. He started to wear that attire around, and of course with some soldiers who'd returned from the war, that didn't go over too well. And the morning of the killings, he went to the mosque as usual, and he wore his white attire. There is a name for it. I don't have the name on the tip of my tongue at the moment. When he did the killings later that day, he was in military uniform, and I'm thinking he probably would not have gotten onto the base with his other clothing. The morning he did the killings, he gave away Qurans. He had given some away in the days before. He gave away his little modest little bed, whatever, little sort of junk that he had in his apartment, told the lady that was his friend, give these to the Salvation Army. And this was the day before he was to be deployed to Afghanistan. And he told some people, he called them up to say goodbye to them, that he was going away, okay, that he was moving. And when he went to this one neighbor that he was who was quite fond of him, that he used to talk religion with, he told her, I'm going to do good work for God, was what he said to her. And then she